If you're anything like me, then you want your summer patio pots to provide colour and interest month after month, creating a display that is stunning to look out onto and even more sumptuous when you're sitting outside at the weekend or relaxing in a comfy garden chair on a warm evening after a long day at work. Displays can be bright and cheerful, luscious and colourful, or calming and relaxing. In fact, you can create whatever you want in patio pots. So in this video, I'm going to share with you some of my favourite planting ideas from the past few summers and show you how I plant and care for these over the summer months. Perhaps you like pots of summer bedding plants, like the striking Osteospermum Blue-Eyed Beauty, or the lovely Petunia Queen of Hearts, which spreads out through summer to tumble over the sides of the pot. Hardy perennials like Peruvian lilies are available in dwarf and compact varieties that are ideal for pots and flower month after month, and I'll show you how I plant them later in this video. There are ornamental grasses like Miscanthus or short golden grasses such as Hackanachoa, but do include some plants with fancy foliage on your patio too, such as hostas. They're one of my favourites, and I grow about 5 different varieties, all planted in quite large terracotta pots. Or how about flowers that grow from bulbs, corms and tubers, such as dahlias that come in such a wide range of colours, forms and sizes, or these lovely pineapple lilies like this bold and beautiful sparkling burgundy. Or how about a pot of Abyssinian Gladiolus for late flowers, so cheap to grow, and I'll show you how to plant these in this video too. Dwarf and compact Clematis look lovely in pots, and I've got several varieties that grow back year after year, so they're great value. Or for a hot and sunny patio, try geraniums, or should I really call them pelargoniums, which really do put on a long-lasting display by producing more flowers right through until autumn if you deadhead the plants regularly. I'll be featuring many more lovely varieties in this video too, so I do hope it provides you with plenty of options to consider for your own summer patio. So let's start in my summer garden with a tour of my early June displays. On the patio I've got lots of big bold pots of hostas looking absolutely glorious. The summer bedding plants are out, the pelargoniums are there, my flower border is bursting into flower and hopefully will go on flowering well into autumn. The beautiful wedding cake tree forms the centrepiece in this bed, and over my garden arch I've got a golden hop and a golden jasmine, clematis growing up the side, and then I've got pots of purple pineapple lilies, osteospermums in bloom, the beautiful Alstroemeria sunshine there in flower, and a host of other things, hopefully giving me colour for month after month after month. Hosta Patriot stays nice and compact in a pot with a broad white margin round the edge of each green leaf. Variety is key to creating a perfect patio, so I grow a wide range of different things so I can move them about to create different displays as we move through summer. Some pots are permanent features, while others, like this Galtonia or summer hyacinth, is put in position in August, producing pure white hanging bell-shaped flowers on tall stems that really steal the show. It's always a pleasure sharing my hints, tips, ideas and advice with everyone. So please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button right away and subscribe to my gardening channel. There's plenty more videos on my channel for you to enjoy too. Alstroemeria are one of my favourite garden plants, and for very good reason. If you want a long season of colour, if you want plants that flower week after week, month after month, then look no further than Alstroemeria, or as they're sometimes commonly called, Peruvian lilies. Whether you're growing them in borders or patio pots, there are varieties available of all sorts of shapes and sizes, colours and heights to suit. And these flower in my garden here in the East Midlands from around the end of May or early June right the way through to the end of the year, giving you a succession of colour month after month. And these are hardy perennials, so they'll come back year after year. Alstroemeria are fleshy or tuberous-rooted perennials, and if you're familiar with a Dahlia tuber, with its central growing point surrounded by thick fleshy tuberous growth, then an Alstroemeria is similar but more delicate, forming a cluster of tiny tubers. But while you can buy dormant Dahlia tubers from garden centres in spring to plant in pots or in the garden, you'll buy Alstroemeria as young growing plants and not bare soilless tubers. You can grow dwarf and compact varieties in pots and containers. A nice large size container is perfect, where they'll quickly fill a pot with flowers. And if you deadhead promptly by pulling or plucking out the old flower stems, new shoots will soon fill the space to carry further flushes of gorgeous blooms right the way through the year. A couple of years ago, I bought 3 plants of a lovely dwarf and compact variety called Havana from a mail order nursery. The plants were delivered in May, well packed in a box, and each plant its own clear carton that held the pot securely and prevented any damage to the small green shoots that were already developing. These plants were growing in 9cm pots, making them a good value to purchase by mail order due to their small size and weight. But you can find larger growing Alstroemeria in full flowering garden centres later in the year, but these will cost you more. My 3 plants were going to be planted in one large patio pot. I chose a plastic pot about 12 to 14 inches across and deep, and then I filled it with a good quality peat-free multi-purpose compost. Firstly, I sprinkle on some white water-retaining gel crystals, as I find this locks in more moisture to keep the plants watered right the way through the summer. And secondly, I'll mix in some slow-release fertiliser granules that gradually release their nutrients slowly through the summer months. Just slipping the pot off one of the plants, I can see a nicely formed root ball with white rhizomes just showing, so this is perfect for planting. Now when I'm planting a pot, I like to sink the empty pots down into the compost, adjusting their height and position to space them out evenly across the whole area. Make sure the height is right so that the top of the root ball of each little plant will sit just level with the surface of the compost. And the top of the compost in the pot is about an inch below the rim of the pot, not too much higher. So you'll be able to water the pot without washing compost out and down the sides. Once all 3 pots are nicely positioned and in place and the compost firm down around each one, you can simply tease up the empty pot and pop in the Alstroemeria root ball down into the hole, which is the perfect size. Repeat this for each of the plants, dropping them down into their respective holes. Then fill in around with more compost and top up the level if required. Just push it down lightly with your fingertips to make sure the compost is in close contact with each root ball. It's important to get rid of any air pockets. Finally, water from above to settle the compost. Take your time and do this thoroughly across the whole area of the compost. Don't stop until the compost is thoroughly moist and water can be seen draining out of the holes in the bottom of the pot. By midsummer, the pot will be full of flower and putting on a bright display of these lovely golden trumpets, each with a speckled throat. And although the displays are short and compact, these pots really pack a punch. So how do you keep their display going through summer and into autumn? Well, it's important to deadhead regularly. So once an individual stem has finished blooming, pluck it out. Rather than cut it off at the base with secateurs or scissors, grab the stem tightly and pluck it. Just pull it away, and by pulling the stem away right the way from the point it joins on to the rhizome at the base, that will encourage new shoots to develop up. So grasp a stem, pluck it out, and that's the best way to deadhead your Alstroemeria to encourage more blooms and stems to form. I just bring my pots under cover into my unheated greenhouse for the winter, where I'll stop watering, I'll let the top growth die back, and then I'll clear it all away. And in the spring, new shoots will start emerging. I can start watering again. I've got a lovely pot of new shoots, and I can bring it back outside and enjoy it on my patio for another summer of glorious colour. I position low-growing pots of Osteospermum around a taller, bold pot of Agapanthus Blue Storm, whose generous display of sky blue flower heads are at their very best through July. I've had it in a pot for quite a few years, so it's probably quite pot-bound, but I think that's what Agapanthus need to flower their best. Lineum lechliniae grows up behind a pot of pink hydrangea, its tall stems arching over under the weight of these impressive golden yellow Turk's cap flowers. Now, plants growing in patio pots and baskets do really rely on the gardener for watering. So there's a good start point actually before we get to this point, before we get to high summer and the weather has warmed up. Do remember that when you put things in pots, try and buy the biggest pots you can, because bigger pots hold more compost and hold more moisture. Now, if I've got things in terracotta pots, and I've got lots of my plants like this Osteospermum growing in these terracotta pots, which look lovely. They're weighty, they're stable, they look really natural, but I line the inside of that terracotta pot just with some old bits of compost bags, some old bits of polythene, before I fill with compost and plant them up. Terracotta is a very porous material, and the pot itself can lose moisture through the sides. So to stop the pot losing so much of that moisture, just lining the pot with some plastic stops the moisture being lost through the sides of the pot. So start off by just lining the inside. Don't cover the drainage holes at the bottom, leave those open. Then the other thing I do in my pots and my hanging baskets, particularly for things that I'm growing outside for the summer, like this beautiful Alstroemeria Havana, is I will mix in some slow release gel, some slow release water releasing gel into the compost at planting time. This is something you'll find available in garden centres. It's a white crystalline material, and it absorbs water. You can mix it into the compost dry if you want, and it will swell when it absorbs water, or you can make it up into a gel before you mix it into the compost, and that helps lock in more moisture, making sure that there are better reserves of moisture in the compost throughout the summer. It stops it drying out so quickly. In my hanging baskets, I also put a little liner in the base. Saucer, an old saucer will do, or make something out of foil, just to act as a little bit of a reservoir in the base of the basket. And that means that rather than all the water running straight out, it leaves that little reservoir of water for the compost to use during the day. And this is one of my favourite summer bedding plants for fragrance. Growing it in a pot, you could put it in a hanging basket as well if you want, but this is Nemesia Wisley Vanilla, and it really does reflect its name. The vanilla fragrance is lovely. I've positioned this pot next to my garden bench because it fills the air with this wonderful aroma of vanilla. Beautiful repeat flowering performance. These flowering stems will just get longer and longer and taller with new flowers opening from the tip. Really long flowering season, perfect in a patio pot. And this actually is its second year. I didn't do anything with in the winter other than just cut the plant back down to its base, put the pot in a shelter position behind my garden arch, and then come the spring, new shoots began to form, and it's come up and flowering again for a second year. So this is just a little tip: don't throw away your summer bedding plants at the end of the year, because some of them you can get through the winter to enjoy a second or maybe even third year of flowering from them without having to do anything to them at all. I always grow a few pots of lilies, and I've had Sunny Martinique for a few years now. It's a dwarf variety, only grows to about probably a couple of foot in height, but produces these beautiful open pink blooms. You've got the anthers here covered in pollen at the tips of the shoots, and this is one reason why, if you've got cats visiting your garden or you own a cat, don't grow lilies. Cats can be poisoned by the pollen from lilies, so you don't want these sorts of varieties. You can get double flowered varieties and ones which are pollen free, but a variety like this wouldn't be suitable if you've got cats around. I don't have cats, and so I enjoy growing lilies in my garden. And dwarf compact ones like Sunny Martinique are ideal for growing in patio pots. Plant the bulbs in the spring, enjoy the display through the summer, and once these flowers have finished blooming, I'll literally cut the tip of the old flower stem off. I'll let the leaves die down naturally through the summer, and then I'll leave the bulbs in the pots of dry compost over the winter and replant them in the spring. I've planted a centerpiece, Yucca gloriosa variegata, in the centre of some of my patio pots, and around the outside I'll put a different bedding plant between summer and winter. So in the summer I've got a lovely Nemesia at the moment, looking gorgeous around the yucca, and in the winter, well, I'll probably get rid of these plants October-ish time and replace with some violas or some pansies to give me some winter colour. You probably know these yuccas, they've got a really sharp tip at the end of their leaves, so do be careful if you're leaning over your plants. That's one reason this is called Adam's needle as its common name. But they look really impactful in pots. They give you a centerpiece to enjoy all year round, and you can change the bedding display between summer and winter. My Agapanthus Blue Storm has flowered a bit earlier this year, starting in early June, producing these beautiful blue flowers with a dark blue stripe down each one. I grow mine in a pot. It's grown to about 2.5 foot in height, and it flowers generously right the way through for many, many weeks, producing dozens of flower spikes. And the bees adore feeding on their flowers too. Look at this one, having a really good feed. Keep it in a pot, move the pot to my unheated greenhouse for the winter, tidy it up in the spring and bring it out to enjoy my patio in the summer. I love growing pots of succulents on my summer patio, and Aeonium Zwartkop has been a favourite ever since I first set eyes on it. Zwartkop is a striking plant, producing very dark succulent rosettes at the tips of upright branching stems. And this dramatic dark colour gives it its common names of black rose or black beauty. If you buy a small young plant, then it's probably just one rosette, but as stems grow taller, they'll branch and send out side shoots, each topped by a new small rosette too, growing larger and more impressive over time. They thrive in full sun. Well, these succulents are native to the Canary Islands and Madeira, so you know they'll enjoy the heat at the height of the day and flourish during a scorching summer without you needing to worry too much about the watering. Aeoniums are easy to propagate too. Just cut off a rosette with a couple of inches of stem attached and push this stem down into some gritty, free-draining compost where it will root and grow into a new plant. Or if a stem accidentally gets knocked off, just use this to make cuttings too. And that's what I do year after year, maintaining a large parent plant but taking a few cuttings every summer to grow on into new plants, to replace the parent plant if it gets too big, or just raise new plants to give away to your friends. And while Zwartkop, with its deep purple, almost black rosettes and branching stems, is very popular, there are lots of other interesting varieties of Aeonium you should try. I've grown Blushing Beauty for many years, which has green rosettes tinged with red, with the outer leaves in particular developing the deeper red coloration. Again, it has a good upright and branching habit and propagates easily from cuttings. The experts at the Royal Horticultural Society like Zwartkop and Blushing Beauty too, as both have received an award of garden merit. Aeoniums can flower in late spring through early summer, but I have to say mine rarely do, just maintaining this lovely succulent foliage interest right through the year. And Vela is another variety I've come across, which is a seedling from the same original breeding cross carried out by Jack Catlin in the United States in 1984, which is a cross between Aeonium Zwartkop and Aeonium canariense. And with Vela, the name coming from the French word for velvet, if growing in full light, as the rosettes age, the leaves around the edge turn a lovely deep purplish red, while the centre remains bright green. For variegated leaves, look out for Aeonium sunburst, with a green stripe running from tip to base down the centre of each leaf, banded to either side by yellowish cream stripes, and often a slightly pink edge, making these succulent rosettes quite striking. This variegated variety is extremely popular and certainly worth searching out if you're looking for something different and can provide the frost-free conditions Aeoniums need through the winter. Single pots of Aeonium can look great on their own. I do prefer growing mine in terracotta pots that are heavier and more breathable than plastic ones, providing more stability, especially when growing in heavier, free-draining, gritty compost too. I gradually move them up into larger pots as they grow, as tall plants can get a bit top heavy and blow over when they become tall and branched and spreading. In fact, a group of rooted cuttings can look impressive planted together in a large terracotta pot, planted in a gritty and free-draining compost, and then finished off with a nice layer of gravel spread over the surface around each plant. And remember that Aeoniums are tender succulents, so they all need to be brought under cover for the winter before conditions turn cold in the autumn, and given frost-free protection right the way through winter. A bedroom windowsill would be fine, but even a greenhouse, some other condition, a porch, a conservatory would be ideal to keep your Aeonium collection looking its best and keep them from one year to the next. Pineapple lilies are my go-to flowering bulb when I'm looking for a long season of interest on my patio. My Eucomis sparkling burgundy forms flower spikes up to around 2.5 to 3 foot tall, and each flower spike carries dozens and dozens of small star-shaped flowers which start opening through July and into August. But as the flowers fade and get pollinated, they form quite striking seed heads as a tiny seed pod at the base of each flower swells. As the season progresses through September and into October, each seed pod continues to grow and swell, changing colour from green to purple. And these bold spikes produce a bold and impressive display right through autumn. Adventurous gardeners might let these seed heads mature to save the seed and grow new plants, but I've never had the patience to do this, and in any case, my Eucomis bulbs divide and multiply naturally each year to produce new bulbs, which can be potted up separately in spring to produce new pots of flowers. Now, these large flower heads can get quite heavy as they develop, so it's certainly worth giving your plants some support. So I usually push a short cane down into the pot next to each bulb around the edge of the pot to tie in the flower spikes as they grow. If you don't, then these spikes can gradually start leaning and then they curve upwards like a swan's neck as they forge up towards the light, like here on this Eucomis Indian summer, which can look quite attractive, but there's always the risk that they'll bend and break. Just take a closer look at these tiny little flowers, which have a thick, slightly waxy appearance. 6 petals forming like a star around its centre, each with delicate pink colouring and a prominent little stamen covered with pollen growing up from the base of each one. They're really quite magical. If you're looking for Eucomis, then you can sometimes find pots of bulbs in flower in garden centres in summer, but the best range of varieties will be available as dormant bulbs from mail order nurseries, ready to buy through winter and spring. Just 5 or so bulbs planted in a pot will produce a lovely flowering feature for any sunny patio. Sometimes when I'm out and about, not actually looking for a plant in particular, but I come across one which I've never seen before, and that was the case with this lovely little Kniphofia called Poco Citron. Kniphofias are red hot pokers, and I don't usually like red hot pokers. I don't like the oranges and the reds and those sorts of colours, but this variety Citron really caught my eye. It's got a lime green coloured flower which starts opening at the base and opens up towards the tip, and it's really generous in its flowering performance. This little plant has already got about a dozen flower spikes on it, some fully open like this one at the front, but others still quite small and dainty, meaning I'm going to get that continuous display of colour week after week after week. And Citron should start flowering around about July time, continue through August into September. Once the flowers have finished and they're faded, I'm going to cut the flower spikes off right down at the base, and hopefully I'll get a further succession of blooms developing. It gives you a good long flowering season, and being short and compact, this series of Poco varieties of Kniphofia should be perfect in patio pots too. Now this has only grown to about 40-45 centimetres in height, about 15-16 inches high, so really good in a pot, good on a patio, or perhaps towards the front of the border where you can set it off against darker foliage or darker coloured plants to really show off these beautiful lime green flowers at their very best. Now these plants are hardy perennials, which means they'll come back every year. The foliage will die back in winter, and in the spring I'll just make sure I've cut everything off at the base to make room for the new leafy growth to develop. This will develop through spring, and by the middle of summer you'll start seeing the first flower spikes develop, and then these will be opening up in the middle of summer to give you that display which takes you through from the middle to the end of summer, perhaps even into early autumn as well. And they love a really sunny position. Not shade, they can grow in part shade, but they might not flower as well. So if you can, a really good warm sunny position to make sure you encourage the best flowering performance. I really hope you're enjoying this video. If you are, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel at Adam's Gardening Guides. Thank you. And if you like the look of Poco Citron, then there's some other dwarf compact varieties in this range, including a Poco Yellow, an orange, a red, and a Sunset, which has a sort of bi-coloured bloom. So perhaps you could get a companion for your plant. Otherwise, I think in my displays, Poco Citron is just what I've been looking for. Now I do grow lots of things in patio pots, everything from bedding plants to succulents to alpines to shrubs and climbers, but maybe this little red hot poker could be something else I could grow in a pot. Puts on a nice long flowering performance, and great to add that late summer colour to your patio displays, probably joined by the sedums which are just coming into flower around about the same time. So compact variety like this won't need any support, could look great in a patio pot. For planting in a border, you need a really sunny site. Kniphofias will tolerate a little bit of shade, but it probably won't flower as well, so a really good position in full sunshine would be ideal. The soil can be sandy and free draining, but it must retain moisture. Doesn't want to be waterlogged, needs to have free draining soil but something which will lock in some moisture as well. And when you plant it, don't plant too deep. Don't bury the crown of the plant or it can start rotting off. So try and plant it at exactly the same level as it's growing in its container itself. Don't plant it any deeper and don't bury it. They're pretty hardy. It is a hardy perennial, but in some areas it might get really cold in winter and need a bit of protection. So a slightly warm position in the garden, near a wall, in a sunny spot which catches the sun in the winter could be ideal. And being short and low growing, somewhere towards the front of the border would be great. And if you could put a backdrop behind it, maybe some shrubs or something to set off the flowering display, so much the better. It will show off those flowers in all their pristine beauty. Some varieties of Kniphofia have got an evergreen leaf. Not quite sure about this, whether these leaves will die down completely in the winter. If they do, you can cut the foliage off completely at the base and it will grow new leaves next year. Some evergreen varieties, you actually tie the leaves up to stop the water getting into the crown of the plant over the winter. So I'll have to wait and see, but I think this is probably one that will die back. And I'll cut these leaves off, and in the spring you'll get a new crop of leaves, and in the summer more flowers developing. And these lovely dwarf Kniphofias also make nice cut flowers. Just wait till the flowers have properly started opening, and then you could literally cut off that stem at the bottom and take these indoors to enjoy as cut flowers in the home. Lots more coming. That prompt deadheading really will encourage. Let me just turn the pot round here. Just more flowers developing. So some flowers here, the smallest one there. So a generous flowering performance from a nice, compact, upright variety. Once plants are really established, they're easy to propagate too. These are sort of clump forming hardy perennial, and they'll have a crown at the base which can be divided up. As I say, on many varieties these leaves will die down completely in winter, or they can be cut off at soil level. But come the springtime, you could divide this clump up. So once this one has become nicely established, after probably a year or two, you'll find that you've got several distinct groups of leaves developing. So you could actually, if it was in a pot, knock the whole thing out, divide it into two, each section with some new shoots probably about to develop and a root ball. I'd probably do this right at the end of winter into early spring, so you can get it repotted and it will start straight into new growth. In the garden, just dig the whole clump out of the border with a decent sized root ball, divide that up into pieces, maybe just into two pieces, or if the clump's got very big and established, divide it into more sections, replant every one, keeping the level of the old root ball absolutely level with soil surface. Do not plant it any deeper. You don't want to cover that with compost or it can start to rot, and then your one plant will turn into two or three or more, and you'll have some spare plants to move around your garden or to share with your friends. Hosta June is a lovely variety. It doesn't get too tall, so for a patio pot this is the perfect size of hosta to choose from. Each of these leaves has got a darker green margin towards the outside, and then an irregular pattern of lighter creamy green on the inside. Gives all of the leaves a beautiful variegation right from the minute the leaves start emerging in April into May, right the way through to autumn. And once we get through to the middle of summer, you start getting the flowers developing. Could be towards the end of June through July and even into early August. The flower spikes, the beautiful dainty blooms start opening, and the flowers themselves open from the base of the stalk up towards the tip. So each of these flower spikes can provide some colour over several weeks. Once it has finished flowering, I'll cut these right down to their base and trim them away completely. You'll be left with this ball of beautiful variegated foliage to enjoy for the rest of the summer. but I think that hostas make perfect patio pots. You could grow them in a shady spot if you want. They're perfectly fine in full sun as well. Just make sure you keep them well watered, and they're hardy, so they come back year after year after year. Don't provide any special protection for it over the winter, but you'll be rewarded each year with a beautiful display like this. Zonal leaf Pelargonium, or geraniums as we commonly call them, are an ideal bedding plant choice for an open position on a hot and sunny patio, as they'll tolerate the heat and flower well at the height of a scorching summer. Of course, they'll need regular watering. Virtually all summer bedding plants in pots will, but geraniums won't wilt and turn crispy if their compost does occasionally dry out, as can happen if you let the compost of petunias or busy lilies dry out. The plants will really suffer if you do. So with geraniums, a weekend away without water shouldn't be the kiss of death. I like to plant geraniums generously, so I've invested in really large terracotta patio pots that hold more compost and therefore more plants to create really bold displays. And personally, I prefer spending a little bit more and buying slightly bigger potted plants rather than the smaller and cheaper plug plants. They're bigger and bushier, carrying more flowers right from the start of the season, and they'll grow away more quickly to put on a colourful show straight away, rather than having to wait for several weeks for them to establish. Firm compost down around each root ball to remove any air pockets. And to keep plants fed throughout the summer, I sprinkle some slow-release fertiliser granules down around each plant, and these dissolve slowly through the summer to provide a regular supply of nutrients for the roots to take up to encourage strong growth and good repeat flowering performance. Water well after planting to settle the compost down around each of the root balls of the plants, and top up with more compost if necessary to fill in any gaps. And do remember that you can place terracotta pots in large saucers and top these up with water early on a summer's day, so the pot has a generous reservoir of moisture to take up throughout the day. This will certainly help ensure pots don't dry out completely on hot days at the height of summer, and is certainly worth putting in place if you intend to be away for a few days or perhaps over a long weekend. And you can choose from many different colours of geraniums, from soft pink to bright salmon, clear, pure white to deep and vibrant red. Eye-catching bicolours like this pink variety to scorching orange and even double-flowered forms, and varieties with variegated leaves too. You can also consider choosing trailing ivy-leafed geraniums, perfect for hanging baskets or around the edge of bigger pots. These also have a superb long season of flowering, and they look lovely in planting combinations, such as here with silver-leafed helichrysum, another bedding plant that relishes hot, dry summer weather. There are so many wonderful varieties of clematis we can grow around our gardens, but the large flowered summer hybrids are some of the most floriferous, and there are lots of varieties to choose from. But the dwarf compact varieties are probably the best to choose when you're looking at something for a patio pot that you need to be reasonably self-contained. Of course, you could grow something in a pot and train it onto an archway or a trellis panel. But in a pot like this, I've chosen a little metal spiral support to train the clematis onto, to provide some extra support as it grows up and flowers. And when you're choosing these metal supports, try and choose one with plenty of horizontal or spiral supports on it. Sometimes these metal supports are very sparse and there's not many spokes to train the shoots onto, but this little one is perfect, pushes down nicely into the pot, is nice and secure, and provides the perfect support for this compact clematis variety. This is Bijou, and isn't it beautiful, with these lovely sky blue flowers, beautiful little boss of sepals in the centre, providing some extra interest. And I love having a few clematis in pots that I can bring out and put in a prime position when they're looking their very best. I know what you might be saying, clematis aren't the longest flowering plant. Their flowering season is shorter than some other plants, but still I think that when they are in full flower, they really steal the show and look magnificent. So choosing a few dwarf compact varieties yourself and growing them on the patio could be just the thing to provide that striking feature, maybe looking at its best through May or June or July, particularly these large flowering hybrids that look bold, colourful and really impressive. Short growing clematis are perfect for pots, and that's exactly what I did with Clematis pilu. This early summer flowering clematis carries mauvey pink flowers with a slightly wavy edge to their petals. You can grow Clematis pilu in a patio pot to add height and interest to your displays. So I bought small plants in the spring and grew them in a large terracotta pot. Make sure there's a drainage hole in the base of the pot and then add an inch or so of gravel to improve drainage at the base, followed by a peat-free potting compost, filling it up to an inch or so below the rim of the pot. You can mix in some slow release fertiliser into the compost at this stage if you want to. Next, make a support by putting in some long canes, perhaps 5 to 6 foot tall, pushing these right the way down into the compost around the edge of the pot. About 8 canes should be fine, spaced out evenly around the pot, and tie them together at the top so you produce a rigid frame. I planted 2 Clematis pilu in my pot, but if you can get a larger plant, then possibly one will do. I planted one on either side. Plant deeply, burying their root balls deeply into the compost. Now gently untwine the shoots from the support canes they're on and tie them onto your new cane framework. Now do work slowly and carefully, as clematis stems are quite brittle and they can easily break, so take your time, tying each shoot onto a different cane with some soft garden string. If the clematis shoots appear too long and tall for your support, then just spiral them into place instead, winding them round and securing them at intervals. Once the compost is firmed around the root balls, water thoroughly to settle the compost down around each plant, and water regularly through warm and dry weather to ensure that the pots don't dry out. Shoots will grow up and carry a lovely display of flowers from around late May through into June. With Clematis pilu, some of the first flush of flowers can be double or semi-double, and you can see here on the bloom on the left with those extra petals, and each flower measures about 4 inches across. All you've got to do is snip these away once they've faded, and new growth will develop through the summer and carry further flushes of flower later in the season. I'm always looking at ways to keep the colour coming through my summer patio. So I've got clematis in pots to give me flowers through June, summer bedding plants like pelargoniums and petunias give me colour through July into August. When you're looking for something to keep the colour going through from August into September, it's worth considering some of the summer flowering bulbs. Of course you can get Eucomis, the pineapple lilies, which look gorgeous, and I've got a range of those which I grow in patio pots, including a lovely dwarf variety called Eucomis layer. You can get Dahlias to grow in pots, and they'll keep the colour going into autumn as well. But today I'm going to grow a little corm called Acidanthera. This is Acidanthera murellii, sometimes listed in the catalogues as Gladiolus as well, Gladiolus calianthus. So you'll find this with both names, beautiful little corm, and I've got a packet here which has got 15 corms in it, and these will be great in a patio pot. Now I want something which is going to give me good stability, because these flowering bulbs will grow to a good 3, maybe 4 foot in height. They produce a sword-like leaf which looks attractive through the summer months, and then the flowers will be coming as we move through probably from August into September time. So today I've got a pot, I've got some grits to go in the base, a good multi-purpose peat-free compost to put in there, and some slow release fertiliser I'm going to mix in at the same time. Now I've chosen a pot which is made of terracotta, but it's got a drainage hole in the base. So I'm going to cover that drainage hole just with some old bits of broken terracotta pot, just to stop the compost from falling out through the hole in the base. And what I also like to do is just to add a layer of grit around that as well. This just makes sure that the pot drains freely and the base of the pot and the compost isn't going to get saturated with water. Then we can add some compost. Good peat-free compost is absolutely ideal. This is a multi-purpose compost, but it doesn't contain much nutrient. So what I do at planting time is to mix in a generous quantity of these slow release fertiliser granules. Mix these in, add some more compost, mix in some more granules, and just get a nice even mix of these throughout. These granules release their nutrients over the course of the coming months, so there's going to be no need to feed this pot. It's going to keep the bulbs going right the way through the summer. Now I want the little corms to be planted about 4 inches deep. So I'm going to adjust the height of the compost in here so that the bulbs will sit about 4 inches below the compost. And I'm going to space these out about 4 inches deep and 4 inches apart. So just get all of your little corms and spread these out. Doesn't have to be too precise, but I'm going to start by planting some around the edges of the container. I can adjust them if I need to space them out a little bit more. The ideal is 4 inches deep, 4 inches apart, but if some are a little bit closer, that's not going to be the end of the world. And these will grow up through the summer months. Now, cover them with more compost. Good layer of compost over the top, and this will leave those little corms sitting a good 4 inches below the compost, and that way this compost is going to be providing some stability to the corms and the plants as they grow. So continue adding more compost. I like to leave the surface of the compost good inch below the rim of the pot, and that makes watering much easier. So something I'll do next, just give the compost a good drench. Settles the compost down around those little corms and will encourage them to start into growth. Now, you could be planting these little Acidanthera as early as March or April. I'm planting mine later in May, which does mean they'll be blooming a little bit later. But if you started them off early, I'd probably plant this up in a conservatory or a greenhouse. Even if it's not heated, it gives that little bit of protection. The compost won't get too cold at night, and it will bring the growth on a little bit quicker. Otherwise, you can wait until it's warm enough to put pots out on the patio, plant these up. And as I say, later planting, probably later flowers, but I'm looking forward to a flowering display on these beautiful Acidanthera, probably later in September. And don't they look wonderful? These are the Acidantheras that I planted in May, and they've been flowering for a few weeks now. I'm into the beginning of September now. These probably started showing their first flowers around about the second half of August, and you'll get different flower spikes developing at different times. Each of those little corms is producing one spike of flower. So at the moment I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, got 6 spikes developed. Hopefully a couple more will develop soon too. And the flowers open in succession as they move up the stems. As the bottom ones have faded, you can just literally pinch off the faded blooms and you'll get more opening up the tip of the shoot over several weeks. So each of these spikes of flowers will produce these beautiful hanging dainty white blooms for several weeks on end, and each of these flowers has got these beautiful little black markings on some of the petals as well. Absolutely gorgeous bloom. Now once these bulbs have finished blooming, because they're growing in a pot, I can bring them under cover. If you planted the little corms in the border, then I would dig them up in the autumn. Don't let them get frosted and waterlogged. But growing in a pot, I'll move this pot to a shelter position. I'll keep watering for as long as possible. I'll let the leaves die down naturally. So I'm going to move this pot into my unheated greenhouse for the winter. Let the plants grow for as long as possible. Keep watering through the autumn time. Let the tops die down naturally. And then I'll be able to harvest the little corms in the same way that you'd harvest gladioli, digging from the borders, cutting back the tops, just saving that little corm, perhaps putting it in some dry compost over the winter time, and then I'll be able to replant them next year. So don't let them get wet and waterlogged and frozen, because that will be the kiss of death to these tender little corms. Give them the winter protection they need, plant them up, and hopefully I'll enjoy another display of flowers next year. Don't forget dahlias for long-lasting colour either for displays in pots and containers, or to cut and bring indoors as cut flowers. So many varieties of dahlia are available. I won't cover them all now. I've mentioned others in some of my other videos, but this one is Pink Princess. I've had it for a few years now. I grow it in a large patio pot. I will bring this pot into my greenhouse for the winter. I don't heat my greenhouse. I'll just let the top die down naturally and leave the dahlia tuber in the pot. Knock it out in the spring, clean off the compost, replant it. But these are wonderful plants to have if you want a long season of colour in your garden. You can find dahlias will be starting to flower probably even as early as July. Certainly this variety was blooming early, giving you flowers through July, August, now into September, and this will keep going right up until frost will nobble it and kill off the top. So if we do get a mild autumn, this can keep going even longer. But if you're in a cold area, then those first frosts of autumn will probably be the kiss of death to your dahlias. Lots of varieties to choose from. You can get short, compact ones. I've got one here, which is just a nice little dwarf one. So there's lots of different varieties you can get for growing in pots and containers on your patio. The main thing to do is to make sure you deadhead regularly. Cut off the dead flowers. Don't let the flowers go to seed, and you will keep the colour going, give you that continuity through. Regular deadheading is essential. It will encourage further flowers to develop from further down the plant, and so you can keep a display like this going right the way through the year. And the nice thing about dahlia tubers, if you can possibly give them that winter protection, is you can replant them. The tuber will be even bigger next year and give you another flowering display. So great value for money, because you buy them once and you can get several years of colour out of that single purchase. This is a hardy perennial called Houttuynia cordata chameleon, usually grown in a bog garden situation. It loves a moist soil, and if I had it growing in a pot here, let's have a look at the root ball. You can see here all this wonderful growth. The shoots tend to go towards the side of the pot and then grow vertically upright, and I think this is now in need of a bigger pot, so I'm going to repot this into a bigger container. What growing it in a pot does, it stops it spreading. If you put this in your border, it can be quite invasive. It just spreads and runs. You can see the character of the plant with these underground rhizomes that grow out and spread out and colonise an area of garden. So I think it's better to grow it in a pot if you can, and I find it a perfect hardy perennial with beautiful variegated foliage to grow in even a shady part of the garden. This will grow beautifully. Now today I'm going to pot it up into a terracotta pot We love terracotta on our patio. This looks good, but terracotta loses a lot of moisture through the sides of the pot. So I'm going to line the inside with just some old bits of compost bag, which I've cut up into strips. First thing I'm going to do is to put a crock over the bottom. I've got a drainage hole in the base of the pot, so I'm going to cover that with a crock and just put a little layer of gravel in the base, just to make sure that it doesn't get too waterlogged. And I'm going to line the inside of the pot itself with some old bits of compost bag. This just stops the compost sitting in direct contact with the pot and stops the roots from drying out. The roots will grow outwards, but rather than getting very hot and dry in the summer, hopefully these will help conserve moisture. And as a bog plant, this plant really does enjoy those sorts of moist conditions. I'm going to put a little bit of fertiliser, slow release granular fertiliser, in the base of the pot. Mix that in. Just put that in. Let's have a look. I need the root ball to sit just below the rim of the pot. A little bit more compost in there today. And just adjust the height a little bit. And then just fill in around with the compost itself. Now, if you find that some of that black compost bag is showing, you can just trim it down with some scissors just to make sure that it sits low. But this is about right. Just sit in the plant half an inch below the rim of the pot, which means that when I'm watering, the water will stay in and soak down into the compost itself. What I'll also do in the summer, keeping these plants on the patio, is to put the pot into a saucer so that I can leave the pot sitting in that nice reservoir of moisture in the saucer during the day. That's exactly what these bog plants want. They don't want to dry out, to stay nice and moist. So there we are, a nice Houttuynia in a pot. Last thing is just to water it in, keep it moist, make sure it doesn't dry out in the summer, and you'll have a nice foliage feature plant. This does produce some very, very small white flowers as we go through into early summer. Not massively significant. I wouldn't say it's a plant you're really growing for its flowers, but certainly I think the foliage on Houttuynias will match any hosta. Beautiful variegation and a nice little patio feature. And any little divisions or bits of roots you find can be potted up, like I've done here, into a smaller pot and grown on. And probably next year the roots would have filled this little pot completely, and I can pot this up into a bigger container, give it some more space, and this will soon grow into as big a feature as my main plant. I've got several Agapanthus in pots growing in my garden, and this is probably the biggest. I think this variety is called Blue Giant. You can see why. It's quite a height. It's in a pot, but these stems are probably a good 3 foot plus tall. And it's produced a massive amount of blooms this year. I think we've got about a dozen flower heads on it. I was actually thinking last year the flowering performance wasn't quite as good. I was even considering knocking out a pot, dividing it up and replanting. But I'm glad I didn't, because I've got this lovely display of flowers now. Now these flower heads can get quite heavy and they can start drooping a little bit as the flowers open and starts to develop. But at the moment, I haven't given these any support at all. I'm getting a really lovely display of flowers, and these are going to provide me with weeks of beautiful flowers as we move through summer. Usually they'll flower and be fully open around about July time, I find, but they start producing these flower heads through June, still providing some interest. I've got some which are nearly open now. I've got some other buds which are still to come. So that means I'm going to get a flowering season extended through that mid-summer period, putting on a beautiful display to enjoy. At the end of the year, all I'm going to do is to move this pot to my unheated greenhouse. This is a variety of Agapanthus that dies down completely. So through the winter, I'll stop watering, I'll let the flowers die down, I'll cut the flower stems off, I'll let the leaves die back, and sometime during the winter, I'll clear away all of that foliage to make space for the new growth the following spring. Let it grow up in my greenhouse, move it out onto the patio once the weather conditions have improved, usually through May time, and then I can look forward to a beautiful summer display. Thanks for joining me at Adam's Gardening Guides. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I'll be producing more gardening videos for you very soon.